A final report for the Texas Legislature on what happened at Camp Mystic 1 year ago. We'll hear from a co-author of that report today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm David Brown. This weekend marks a year since the deadly and devastating Hill Country floods. Today we'll hear from a University of Texas at Arlington researcher developing a comprehensive warning system to save future lives. Also, a Hill Country couple hailed as heroes in the aftermath of last year's flooding. Mando Rayo on a trained group of volunteers formed after Mexico City's 1985 earthquake who came from Mexico to help with the floods. Those stories, the week in politics with the Texas Tribune, and a whole lot more when the Texas Standard gets underway right after this. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this third day of July 2026, 1 year removed from a dividing line in our collective memory. There are places that become part of a state's identity, and for generations, the Texas Hill Country was one of them. A landscape of winding rivers, limestone bluffs, barbecue joints, dance halls, and summer camps where childhood memories were made. But 1 year ago, those familiar landmarks became the setting for one of the deadliest natural disasters in modern Texas history. Since then, many Texans can't hear the words Hill Country without thinking of the lives lost and the many others that were forever changed. In the early morning hours of July 4th, rapidly rising floodwaters left 25 campers and 3 staff members at Camp Mystic dead. In all, that weekend's floods claimed 139 lives in what would be the deadliest flood disaster in Texas in more than a century. And as the waters receded, the questions rose. How could this happen? Could it have been prevented? What can be done to save lives in the future? State lawmakers commissioned a report into the camp's flood response, a report put together by investigators Casey Garrett and Michael Massengale, a former justice on Texas's 1st District Court of Appeals. That report was released in June and included, among other details, that Camp Mystic did not have state-required written emergency plans or evacuation measures that could have prevented deaths. One of the authors of that report joins us now. Justice Michael Massengale, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Well, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be on.
This is the legislature's final investigative report, as I understand it. What do you believe was the single biggest failure that contributed to the loss of life that day?
Lack of preparation, failure to satisfy basic rules for emergency planning. If there had been an emergency plan that included plans for evacuation, the leadership of the camp, from the top down to the counselors, would have had some idea of what to do if they were confronted with a terrible flood situation as they were a year ago. So the fact that there was no written plan, nothing done in the way of training for camp staff to be prepared to evacuate, no drill of any kind for letting campers and counselors both have an idea of exactly how you're going to conduct yourselves to remove yourself from the threat of a flood. Then as you come into the actual events of a year ago, there were warnings, first flood alerts leading up to the flood that should have put the leaders of Camp Mystic on alert, that they needed to be watchful and prepared. The report of the legislature concluded that there was no adequate preparation leading up to the flood, except for Dick Eastland, the main leader and patriarch of Camp Mystic. The other senior leadership of the camp all went to bed on July 3rd, 2025, without any sense that there was a risk of severe weather that night.
Mm-hmm. And Eastland, of course, died in that flood.
He did.
Correct?
He did, and we believe that he was up and watchful. But he's one person. They had a staff of dozens, as you would expect, to be able to operate a camp with nearly 600 young girls.
Let me ask something, because I think about lawmakers wanting to do something that could save lives in the future. And as you point out, Camp Mystic didn't have the emergency plans that complied with state requirements. So there were state requirements. What more could the state have done? What more could policymakers do? There was already a requirement for the plan, but the plan didn't exist.
You're right to ask that question. And one thing that was identified in this process is that the state did have a process of annual inspections for camps like Camp Mystic. Camp Mystic actually was inspected on July 2, 2025, and it passed its inspection. And one of the items on the inspection nominally required the inspector to check for emergency plans. And if you look at the piece of paper that they use, you would think that they were checking the substance of the emergency plan to make sure it complied with the rules. What came out in the immediate aftermath of the floods, and this was addressed by the legislature last fall, the inspectors really were not doing that. They were trained as sanitation inspectors. Their main focus was making sure that the kitchens were sanitary. They're checking temperatures in refrigerators and ice machines
But not
and
the
things like that.
sufficiency of the emergency plan, just that there was something labeled that.
Correct. For the emergency plan, it was more verifying that one existed, and the inspectors were not reading the plan, comparing it to what the requirements were, and then saying this is insufficient. Another thing that came out of this was that the way emergency response is structured in Texas, the people who have the initial responsibility for preparedness are our local government leaders, our mayors, our county judges, and our local government are supposed to be the ones who are the front line of emergency management. Kirk County did not get a lot of advance warning and encouragement and help from its local emergency response leadership leading up to July 4.
Does your report make any recommendations in terms of liability or consequences for Camp Mystic or its leadership?
The investigation that the legislature has done is intended to surface facts to inform future policymaking. The question of civil consequences for the owners and operators of Camp Mystic or anybody else is really a separate question. We didn't try to address the question of whether the owners and operators of Camp Mystic were negligent in a jury trial or in an arbitration or before a bankruptcy court, wherever these questions ultimately get resolved. Both sides are going to have an opportunity to present their arguments. It's what we call an adversarial process.
Sure.
And both sides get to be heard. We didn't have a process like that here. We were simply seeking facts, and we found a lot of important facts that bear on these questions, but we thought it was important to stay away from that negligence question, which is for those lawsuits.
After a year of investigations, do you feel that this report settles the major factual questions surrounding Camp Mystic, or do you feel that there's still some important unanswered questions?
In terms of what is needed to inform policy going forward, I do think we answered the most important questions. The legislature is now equipped to fine-tune the rules and regulations that apply to the camps, to make changes that are necessary to the administrative agencies that oversee that, and also to look at how we administer emergency response and disaster response in this state. Those are all important questions. I think we did address the facts that are important for those questions. There are other questions that are interesting and important that bear on the lawsuits. And we tried to steer clear of disputed questions that relate to the lawsuits, but really were not important to the legislature's policymaking function.
Let me ask you one other question, and this has sort of hung over as I've thought about the events of that weekend, at least for me. And it's something that came up as a finding in your report, but it hasn't received much attention, and it involves counselors' communication. Cell phones had been confiscated. There was a lack of backup radios. And I've often wondered, could anything have been done from that point of the first warnings going out and when the evacuations actually began? How do you square what happened with the cell phones and the lack of backup radios? And could lives have been saved if the cell phones had not been confiscated? How do you see that?
Well, there was fundamentally a communication breakdown that contributed to the tragedy at Camp Mystic. And I'll come back to the cell phones, but there was a functional loudspeaker system at Camp Mystic. They used it every night. They played taps late at night to signal it was time to go to bed. It was expected that the loudspeaker would be used to communicate to campers if there was a need for them to leave their cabins. But it was never used, and it's been a big mystery why it was never used. If it had been used, there was every reason to believe that all of those children had the opportunity to get out of their cabins at a point in time when it was safe for them to do so. They could have moved to higher ground that was safe. So I don't think it's right to conclude that there was not communication equipment at Camp Mystic necessary to avoid the tragedy. They failed to use what they had. Now, once they were in the circumstance of campers and counselors being trapped, the lack of any communication devices in the cabins did become a problem. It's a separate problem. It's not the problem that caused lives to be lost, but it was still a real problem in the aftermath.
Michael Massengale is former justice on the Court of Appeals for the First District of Texas and co-author, along with Casey Garrett, of a final report on the flood response commissioned by the Texas Legislature. We're going to have more on that report at texasstandard.org. Justice Massengale, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us on the Texas Standard. We certainly do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
With a $4 million grant from the governor's office, researchers at the University of Texas at Arlington are developing a new system they hope will give communities in flood-prone areas of the Hill Country more time to respond before floodwaters become life-threatening. We're going to hear more about that as the Standard continues.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Barron, Adler, Clough & Odo, a Texas eminent domain and condemnation law firm helping to protect the rights of Texas property owners for more than 40 years. More at barronadler.com. Support for Texas Standard comes from UT San Antonio, providing education and research for communities across Texas with a focus on student success and workforce development. The University of Ambition, utsa.edu.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. This weekend marks a year since the deadly and devastating Hill Country flooding. One of the immediate reactions to the immense tragedy that weekend was, how could this have happened in the first place? Despite public warnings, how was it that so many people didn't know they were in danger? But is a flash flood warning system really possible? And if so, how exactly would this work? Researchers at the University of Texas at Arlington have been working to answer those questions. They were awarded a $4 million grant from the governor's office to create a real-time flood warning system. Nick Fang is a professor of civil engineering at UT Arlington. Professor Fang, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you very much.
So tell me about when you started working on a flood warning system for the Hill Country. Did this begin with the events of last July 4th?
Yeah, that was. We've been doing research and the system development for flood warning system for more than 2 decades. So with the years of experience and also we learned the needs of communities, and we wanted to really kind of deliver the best flood warning system to the community like Camp Mystic area as well.
What's involved with a flood warning system, a comprehensive flood warning system? I think a lot of us sort of envision cell phones ringing, maybe a loudspeaker going off, maybe a siren wailing in the background, but I don't think any of us really have a good idea of what a comprehensive flood warning system would look like.
That is a really fair question. For most users, you're probably going to really see a great graphical user interface, and that could kind of involved with a cell phone and or website. You can go in there. But under this surface, there's a lot of sophisticated mechanism behind it. So you need to have a very accurate radar rainfall data as that information you put in the system. And you need to have a very well calibrated, a certain we call a mathematic model, which is also called a hydraulic model that takes in, it's a radar rainfall and generates of a hydrologic response behind the scene. And then you use a very user-friendly interface to translate that information for the end user. They can digest, they can understand there too. So that's where people usually say, hey, there's an iPhone app you can see right there. But there's a lot of information being flowing to be ingested into the system. You do that. So the beauty of a flood early warning system is you actually really use a physics-based reaction. For example, rain hits on the ground, actually does not generate the flood water immediately. It takes time to process the rainfall and finally turn it into the overland runoff, right? So scientists actually take advantage of this knowledge, and theory is that what if I know the rain hits on the ground now, I can use a hydraulic model to say, hey, when the peak elevation and peak flow going to be generated at a given location. So that time is a mathematical model which we run behind the scene right there too. So that is the essential vehicle of the flood warning system.
So it begins with the science and moves on to the siren. That's it. It has to be
exactly. So most of the people always think, hey, early warning is a siren or whatsoever. But early warning does not start with a siren, but really start with the science.
Who's in charge of this as you see it? When I think of flash flood warnings, I typically think of the National Weather Service. With the system that you have been working on, would this be something that local officials would oversee? Because it seems like you would have several different, for instance, agencies that might be tasked with or might be responsible for different layers of this system. How do you see that setting up?
So we are researchers, and our main role is to really package science into a final usable package right there too. So really the final people in charge of it and operating system could be from a local river authorities, emergency personnel, and or local official, government entities right there too. So that actually involves the coordination for the development itself. And second one here is once we actually deliver the system, people really run and operate the system. They need to know how to really translate the information and to the final public and communities.
Do you have a sense of when a ready-to-go system could be delivered to the Hill Country? Is there a timetable or a timeline that you have now?
So these are particular funding we receive from the governor's office that is going to really for us to develop a fully operational system by end of September 2027. But we are actually currently kind of developing the system itself. We could have a beta version very soon, but I don't have a clear date for this, but we try our best to really deliver the system as soon as possible.
I see. From the end user, how would the end user experience this early warning system? Do you imagine that there would be a phone alert or a physical alert on the ground or what?
Yes, it's individual going to receive an alert from their phone. That is going to be ideal. But if we remember, so during Camp Mystic flood last year, that area is very lack of the signal coverage too.
Right.
So even you have a phone, may not be really useful because you don't have a signal reception there at all. So we were actually really want to see, hey, this is the information we actually generated, and that going to tie with the sirens. From a local entity, they can trigger trigger off this big siren sound during the midnight there too. So that could be combination, and we are still evaluating the final communication methods at this moment.
Yeah, you mentioned the lack of cellular coverage in that part of Texas. Are there any other particular issues about the Texas Hill Country that you have to take into account as you're developing this system?
Hill country is a very unique area. We've been looking into investigating the geological and hydrologic conditions there too. So two things. One is this reason why they call hill country is the terrain is very steep, right? And second one here is the soil layer is very thin. So what does that really mean right here is once the rain hits on the ground, water just kind of running through. So the response time is very, very short as well. Second one here is the lack of a soil layer actually really the infiltration process. So the soil usually has a kind of like a buffer zone. You can take in the water and release and be saturated and release the overland runoff. That actually really been taken away. So those are the challenges for hill country. We put a lot of effort to develop a very sound hydrologic model that represents local condition there as well. Because we know the good quality model itself will deliver final warning with a very high confidence.
So September 2027 is the deadline that you're working toward. Is this going to be bigger, do you think, than just Texas's hill country? Do you see this being used elsewhere, and is that on your radar?
It is. We are envisioning, this is going to be a first pilot study area for us to develop, to demonstrate the feasibility itself. But I believe in the future, the similar technology and the benefits should be amplified for other areas as well.
Nick Fang is a professor of civil engineering at UT Arlington, and he's leading work to deploy a hill country flood warning system that could save lives in other parts of the world as well. Professor Fang, thank you again for taking time to talk with us on the Texas Standard.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Half Price Books, a Texas-bred new and used bookstore, proudly supporting public media and sustainability by keeping books, music, and other media in circulation. Store locations and more information at hpb.com.
Hey, what's cooking? Make sure to join us as we check in with Texas's top taco journalists to hear about the latest innovation stories and the people behind many a Texan's favorite go-to. It's Mando Rayo with the Tacos of Texas. Next Thursday on the Texas Standard.
Support for Tacos of Texas comes from HEB.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Like many Kerrville locals, Ryan Logue's life changed forever during the deadly hill country flooding. He joined a rescue and recovery effort that has lasted into the present day. Logue became a volunteer for the United Cajun Navy, which has a mission for short-term disaster relief. But even as his team moved on, Logue is still doing the work, clearing out debris and always holding out hope for a sign of the two people still missing, Seal Stewart and Jeff Ramsey. Logue told Texas State student journalist Megan Weissy that he hopes by clearing the Guadalupe River, he'll heal his community's relationship with it.
When the storm happened, I have a 7-year-old daughter. The girl that's still missing and the girls that passed through became missing here are that same age. And I actually know one of their fathers. That day when I realized what was going on, I don't know, the whole world changed at that point. I couldn't look back and just kind of kept going. And that first day I got set up with the United Cajun Navy, and they gave me instructions on what to do, kind of guided me along the way. I had never done any of this before. I was just a Kerrville local that woke up to his town being flooded. And they reached back out and started giving me stuff to do. And the next thing you knew, I was running operations for them, helping them get everything set up and doing whatever was needed to help the community at that point. I mean, it was from search and recovery, search and rescue, to making sure people that were in their homes were found. At that point, it was whatever you could do to make sure that anybody that was affected or devastated in any way, that they were taken care of. I was put in an extraordinary situation and did as extraordinary of things like I possibly did. It was, I don't know, it was God showing me my calling. It was showing me what I was supposed to do and what I'm always supposed to be doing. A lot of this comes up to like now, our efforts are cleaning up the river. But cleaning up the river also is a hand-in-hand deal with finding seal as well, and Jeff Ramsey. We have searched from here all the way to Kerrville so many times. Just the group that I'm with now has. And, if she's here, we're going to find her. We're going to get every piece of debris that's not natural in here out of here. Any debris that obstructs the waterways, we're going to make sure we get out of here. This river was my pool. This river wasn't just a place you swam. It was where you healed your body, mind, and soul. If you drove through town and you were having a bad day, you would get in the far right lane on the bridge. You do one of these as you peeked. Just wanting to see the water, the park, all of that kind of stuff. So getting it close to the same, and them just knowing it's safe to swim in, and that you're able to just enjoy yourselves around it. It's hard to see people's lives get turned upside down. It's hard to see people feel hopeless. And to know somebody like me has to be the hope, it's almost kind of scary. And I had to be the hope. Life doesn't prepare you for that, but when you're put in that situation, you stand up to it, and you make sure you are that for those people. As I look at this and I'm now experiencing it from ground zero, day one, to being one of the last people out here. I'm from Kerrville. There's a lot of things that have put me in a position to be able to do this. You can't bring back the people who are lost. The one thing helps save the hearts of those people who are also in back yet.
Ryan Logue shared his story about continuing to clear the Guadalupe River with Texas State student Megan Wisey. Volunteers were a huge part of the Hill Country flood relief efforts. One trained group came from Mexico, despite the rocky U.S. relations with that country. The group, known as Los Topos, formed after Mexico City's devastating 1985 earthquake. I spoke with Tacos of Texas podcast host Mando Rayo about their involvement last July. Well, tell us more about this group. Who are this group of volunteers, and is it often that they come to the aid of the U.S.?
Yeah, the Topos Aztecas, they go where they're needed, right? It doesn't matter about boundaries, about borders or whatnot. For them, it's about supporting a community, supporting humanity. And for them, outside of, what may be going on in between countries, the politicalness of it, they're just there to save lives. And and they've been doing it for over 40 years.
When natural disasters hit in particular, does it feel sometimes like an opportunity to just move beyond whatever political issues or sticky international relations are there for, as you say, sort of the benefit of humanity?
Yeah. We have to, right? If we're really going to put people's lives first. And so, sometimes we kind of get stuck in the politics of everything. I guess part of the main question is like, what are we doing for others? And the Topos Aztecas are answering. They're here for a service to humanity. One of the lead Topos, Hector Mendez, said, for him, it's like, it doesn't matter what the politics are. We are here as one people to serve humanity.
Well, you mentioned Hector. We've actually got a clip of him. This is from AJ Plus Media from an interview. He's the founder of Los Topos. Could you listen to this? And I think this underscores what you were saying.
Yeah.
Voluntario es otro tipo de gente que estamos más allá de cuestiones de tipo político, racial, religioso, de género. Si el voluntario está al servicio de la humanidad.
So he's talking about volunteers there. What's he saying?
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, this whole idea that, volunteers are there in service of others. You got to put racial and divide lines and political lines aside because they are here to serve humanity. And, at the core, what you do for others, if that's your calling, then it doesn't matter the language, any barriers, if you're there to help and support. And we saw that with the floods and supporting, communities in Central Texas. I mean, in a time where Mexicans and immigrants, are not being welcome in the United States, you got this group that said, you know what, it doesn't matter. We're here to help.
It makes me think a little bit about USAID, but really there was no hiding that one of the goals of USAID was to yes, support the world, but also to garner good sentiment towards the United States. In this case, these are volunteers acting outside of federal support. They don't have any other goals here of improving international relationships. They're just doing what they think is right. Is that right?
Yeah. And, to be at the end of the day, do what you think is right. Lead with your heart and just help a neighbor out, so help someone in need. And at the end of the day, this is kind of funny. I have this funny thing, volunteering, it doesn't pay, but you get tenfold back, right back in your heart.
Mando Rayo is the host of the Tacos of Texas podcast, a podcast focused on food, culture, and its ability to create connections here in Texas and beyond. We'll have a link to more at texasstandard.org. Mando, thanks for talking with us.
Thank you, Laura.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a Texas-based workers' compensation provider committed to providing care and support for injured employees. More at texasmutual.com/TexansDeliver.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Judy Dale had been coming to the Guadalupe River outside of Hunt for the 4th of July weekend with her friends and family for decades. Last year was no different. She was with a group of about 30 people that included her daughter, granddaughter, her brother, and close friends. But what started as a usual trip with swimming and brisket turned into something else entirely when a member of the hotel staff banged on her door at 3 a.m. and told her to evacuate because the river was rising. Dale spoke with us about the experience last year shortly after the floods. Can you take me back to the moment when you got that knock on your door around 3 a.m.? What happened next?
We woke up and we were very discombobulated. The storm was raging. It was constant lightning and thunder. This wonderful woman was standing outside shouting at us that the river was coming up and we had to leave immediately. So we grabbed my grandson, who was 7 years old. He was sleeping in the living room. And we walked out the door, and I turned around as I walked out, and I saw that the clock said 3:15 in the morning. My daughter and my granddaughter were staying 2 rooms down. We all walked down to our car. We had separate cars down in the parking lot. We got in. We were soaking wet by that time. The cars were pulling out of the parking lot onto Highway 39. We were in this line of traffic, which was stopped because it couldn't go any further where the river crosses the road there. And we sat in our car. I don't know how long it was. It seemed like forever. And we were making a plan if the water was rising. We were watching a mailbox next to us, and we saw the water rising, and we had decided if it got to a certain point, we would get out of the car and try to cross the road and go up the cliff behind the river inn. And as we were contemplating what to do, this woman, and I have come to find out her name is Lisa Coffey, she appeared out of nowhere again, banging on our window and told us the river was coming up. We had to leave our cars. And she had a caretaker's apartment in the parking lot of the River Inn where we were staying. There was a second floor apartment there. To find our way there, we got out of the car. My friend Greg took my grandson by the arm. He was holding him very tightly. I just remember he told him to be brave, and I heard him saying, He wouldn't let go of him. And they started making their way back towards the parking lot of the River Inn. I was following them. The water was at our shins, and in a second or two, it was up to our knees. There was quite a bit of pressure and debris moving through the water. So we got to the stairs and made it up into this apartment, very small apartment. And there were maybe 6 or 7 people already there. The time ticked on. All of a sudden, there were more and more people coming in, and I had no idea where they were coming from. And the river had gotten so high, there was a low-hanging roof on this apartment that you could clamber up, and then you could get in a window into the second floor apartment where we were sheltering. And people were being swept by. There were people helping other people up. My daughter and granddaughter appeared miraculously. They came through the window. Everybody was helping everybody. They were grabbing, people had dogs and they were floating by, and people were grabbing them and pulling them up onto the roof and helping them up. And I think in the next 30 minutes, there were, 40 people in that tiny apartment. And my brother and his wife appeared, and they had been in several cars ahead of us. And she told me later that the water was, I think, to her waist when she got out of the car, and it was up above her chest as she got to the house, and someone pulled her up onto the roof and then through that small window. And I remember saying, "What time is the sun going to come up?" And somebody said 6:41. And we were just minutes shy of that. We could see the road. The parking lot was back. And we went out to survey. Every room on the bottom floor had water had pushed through it. Some had walls missing, windows missing. And if this woman, Lisa Coffey, had not been watching what was going on, then they alerted us. So we all had time to get out, because another 45 minutes would have been too late for everybody on the first floor.
It must have been emotional to experience this with your daughter and your grandchildren.
I'm emotional now. I was very unemotional at the time.
Just focused, I guess, on survival, yeah.
Nothing was going to happen to my grandchildren. I never entertained that anything would happen other than we would get them to safety and they would be fine. We were cut off from the outside world. No one had cell service. We had no idea what was going on.
And then it was still a long wait until you saw rescuers.
Yes, we didn't see the first helicopters. I think they arrived in early afternoon. Boy, it felt good to hear those choppers coming in. During the day, someone found a grill and brought out their food that was going to spoil. They had been on a second floor, so they still had food. And so everyone from the second floor who had food brought all their food out, and it was cooked on the grill, which was very nice. The sense of community was awesome. And then about 6:15, I believe it was the Kerr County Sheriff, it was a Humvee arrived, and it took 12 people and dogs, and they said they would come back for the rest of us. And I think it was about 9 when I guess it was the National Guard came in an open air truck. And we all loaded in, and they took us to Ingram. We were taken on to Kerrville, where we spent the night at a Methodist encampment. I've never been in a better hotel in my life. And the next morning, friends from Austin came and picked us up and brought us home.
How have you been feeling since then?
very numb, very, very sad for everyone who suffered. The pain is unimaginable for all those families who lost their children. It's incomprehensible. We were lucky. We were lucky, but our hearts go out to everyone else.
Judy Dale and her family survived the Hill Country flooding last year. We revisited our conversation with her as the anniversary of that flooding approaches.
Support for Texas Standard comes from H-E-B and the My H-E-B app, which is available for download, and shopping fresh departments like seafood, produce, bakery, and deli, and scheduling curbside pickup or home delivery. More at heb.com.
This is Sean Petrie with the Typewriter Rodeo, and we are a group of friends who type poems on the spot on whatever topics people want. Music for listener Nancy. You can look for it in books, perhaps revel in the spark of a sunset. And there are churches and ice cream and puppies. But set me down in front of a stage where a songwriter is lighting up the night, guitar thrumming with passion, words floating like midnight clouds. Yes, set me down there, where I will close my eyes, sway and swoon and soar away. This is Sean Petrie, and you're on Texas Standard Time.
You can hear the Typewriter Rodeo every Friday here on The Standard. Got a suggestion for a custom poem? Send over your idea. You just might hear it on the radio. But for now, time for the week that was in Texas politics. Jasper Scherer is politics editor for the Texas Tribune. Jasper, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, big decisions from the Supreme Court this week. On Tuesday, the Supreme Court made a decision, didn't get a whole lot of attention, not as much as, say, the birthright decision, but it was a decision to get rid of caps on coordinated spending by political parties. And a Texas Tribune article this week noted that this could be a benefit to Ken Paxton. Could you say more about that?
Sure. Yeah, this is one of those decisions that's, I think more significant than it sounds on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And this the decision, of course, grants both parties the same coordination powers, but Republicans are expected to benefit more. And the reason is, Democrats typically fundraise more heavily through their to the candidates themselves, whereas Republicans. They have bigger donors who tend to give money more to the party organizations themselves. And we're seeing, in Texas, James Talrico significantly outraising Ken Paxton. And on the other hand, the national Republican parties have their party committees have significantly more money than the Democratic organizations. So that those groups will have the ability to, funnel that money to Ken Paxton and help him make up that gulf if they want to. They might also, direct some of that to other battleground states like Maine, North Carolina. There's all kinds of other competing priorities, but the bottom line is that Paxton could be kind of bailed out from this ruling.
It's fascinating to me how much this U.S. Senate race here in Texas has been grabbing the national spotlight. I know you probably have heard about this. Some of our listeners may have heard us talk about it as well. President Trump announcing that the Republican Party will have a midterm convention in Dallas. I've never heard of a midterm national GOP convention or Democratic convention. Have you? Is this a first of its kind?
It seems like it. That's best that we could understand. And I think part of the reason that the big reason they're doing this is that they are trying to buck this national trend that we see for both parties, where the party in the White House typically struggles during the midterms,
right.
And so they're trying to make the election, I think, more about Trump, who's not going to be on the ballot, by putting him front and center at this convention and trying to get his kind of those legions of Trump voters who skipped the midterms to actually turn out this time. But of course, it's also a double-edged sword because Trump's approval ratings are not looking so hot these days. So it's kind of running the risk of backfiring by make the election about Trump. You might also, draw out all the folks who don't like the job that he's doing. So,
yeah, totally.
Interesting.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And I think he's going to be making an appearance at this convention. Obviously, this is a story that is developing and one that the team over at the Texas Tribune is tracking. That's where Jasper Scherer is politics editor. We'll have links to more, texasstandard.org. Jasper, thanks so much.
Of course. Have a good weekend.
You too. And you are listening to the Texas Standard.
Unfulfilled promises. That's one listener's answer to this week's Talk of Texas question.
As we approach the 250th anniversary of this nation's founding, what does the U.S. mean to me in 2026? It means unfulfilled promises.
I'm Wells Dunbar with the Texas Standard, and that's the voice of listener Keith Good. He traces our current issues back to the country's earliest days.
In his farewell address, George Washington warned against political parties and told us that they would tear us apart. And sure enough, they've torn this country apart because people choose political parties like they choose team sports.
And he says history offered other warnings, too.
Alexis de Tocqueville, writing in the early 1800s as he toured this great American experiment on behalf of the French government, warned against capitalist aristocracy rising up to replace the aristocracy of monarchies, and spoke of the need to impose regulations on industry to keep them in check.
The same question landed a little differently for another listener.
Hey, my name is Brandon, and this question really had me conflicted about how I'm really feeling right now in 2026.
That conflict starts with disappointment.
So much that was told to me in school and by people who are older than me. It just kind of seems that those goalposts have been pushed further and further, all in the name of self-interest or greed. And every time that gets challenged, it's all behind a facade of doing things in the name of the American people. It just made me really disappointed of who we are at the moment and what we have become.
But for Brandon, it doesn't end right there.
But I would also be lying if I said I wasn't hopeful. Who we are as a nation is not just defined by those actions. I've seen plenty, especially here in Texas, about what can be done to make a better nation and a better union. And especially as the son of two immigrants from different countries who came here, all I see here is just the promise of being better. And I really, really have hope that that can come.
What does the United States mean to you in 2026? We'd love to hear your answer. I'm Wells Dunbar, and this is the Talk of Texas.
The first time I met Casey Cheek, I learned he was from Abilene, fresh out of production school, but I can't imagine they taught him much since he's one of the most naturally talented audio engineers I've ever had the honor to work with. He's been our technical director since before he got the show on the air more than a decade ago, reporting live from the middle of Hurricane Harvey, grilling dinner out of the bed of his pickup before a live remote broadcast. Through ice storms and lockdowns, Casey's held down the fort in the control room, the bustling heartbeat of the station. As producers and reporters popped in and out, he's patiently listened to our big ideas, our little frustrations. A confidant, a keeper of secrets, the someone who cares. Oh, the stories he could tell. Right now, from where I sit in the studio separated by glass, I can see him in the control room, the wizard behind the board. Casey's voice in my headphones talking to us. In for a landing one last time. 30 seconds left. As we close out today, Casey heads off for a new job in North Texas, technical director for a new show at KERA. But for me, for many of us, it's like saying goodbye to a brother, and all I can think of is how lucky we've been. No matter where you are, Casey, we'll always be grateful for those Texas Standard times that were. From Austin, I'm David Brown, wishing you all a wonderful 4th of July.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Woldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family. Would your company or organization like to be a sponsor as well? Contact your local station for opportunities within your community. For statewide sponsorships, visit TexasPublicMediaNetwork.com.